We in this world. Get loud, oh, be quiet, quiet.
Hello and welcome back to the Cosmic CEO web series. I'm your host, Amelia Fortes, the Cosmic CEO, helping you align your life and business with the stars. This series is all about the changing landscape of online business, social media, and content creation. A lot has changed in the last 10 years with Instagram blowing up, YouTube, TikTok, and all of the things. And there's a love-hate relationship with business and social media. And I've brought some of my favorite people in the world as experts to discuss their entrepreneurship journey and what they've seen. And I'm so excited for today. We have Robinson Lynn, who is the Executive Director of Momentum Education. He is also a speaker and advisor with over 15 years of leadership experience and has become a friend of mine. I am proud to say and very happy to say that I feel like I've been able to witness your journey from the beginning, and I've been a part of your community pretty much almost from the beginning, at least the beginning of your journey when you took over. And I'm just excited to have this conversation. There's so much to talk about. Thank you for being a yes. Thank you for being here.
I'm really excited for this conversation as well. I think any conversation with you is like enjoyable and valuable. This one just happens to be recorded and shared. The same way you have said, you've been here for a long portion of my journey. I feel like I've been able to see you, I'm looking at that stars in the background. I feel like I've been able to see you just as be a star that's thriving. So I'm really excited for this conversation and grateful for the opportunity.
Oh, thank you so much. I so appreciate that. Yeah, you've known me for a long time, and you've also worked with other people, everyone from professionals, teachers, executives, actors, musicians, artists, all the way up to corporations like Nike and Google and Disney and BET. So with all of your experience as an advisor, speaker, leader, transformational leader, what are some like notable things that you've seen throughout your journey?
You talked about the journey of the last 15 years, and I think you started here by just talking about all that's changed in the last 10 years. And so I think something that really sparked as you were asking that question is how individuals and organizations, their relationship with change impacts their ability to succeed. I think about the star player who had a plan that worked 5 years ago, but now some of the rules in the league may have changed, or certain roles that were completely planned in a very specific way and then are shifting because of changes in the economy that people couldn't anticipate. So I became the director of Momentum, I think, right during a recession, was the director of the organization during a global pandemic, right? And so I've been able to see lots of different ways in which change is a constant and really see the people who are embracing change, how they can thrive even in times that are challenging, and how those who fight change are sometimes too exhausted from fighting the change to make the impact or difference that they're would like to make.
It's so interesting. Thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of people that would watch this show, watch this episode, would be like, okay, I'm going to learn some like business strategies. I'm going to learn how to do some spreadsheets and all this other stuff. But really, entrepreneurship is such an internal journey, and we're changing, business is changing, audiences are changing, buyer behavior is changing. So let's get a little personal then. How have you seen yourself change as a leader from like 15 plus years ago till now? Like what has it required from you to be able to navigate all this?
That's a great question. I guess we're going to turn this into a whole series. No,
Yes, let's get juicy.
One of the things that jumps to mind around just overall flexibility, right? And I'm going to say this in relationship to myself, but I'm also going to say what I see in others as well, is that you talk about, the people who are ready for their spreadsheets and give me the 5 things. And now I have my 5-year plan. And some of the biggest thriving that the organization has done, some of the biggest thriving that I've done, was never put on a 5-year plan. It was never put on a 2-year plan. It was put on, this is what's happening right now. And how are we going to respond or not respond? How are we going to pivot or not pivot? How are we going to shift based on what's happening in a changing landscape? And I think about, I was thinking about in relationship to this, how many entrepreneurs who are about to start off feel like they can't start until they have every aspect of their plan planned. And it so rarely goes as planned that I think there's so much value in getting started and being flexible and adapting your plan as is, right? And so I'll say that from like a business perspective. From an individual perspective, that's had a lot to do, even myself, right? I think about 15 years ago, I wasn't a father. I became a father in 2021, and that had a direct impact on how I like to work, the times that are appropriate for me to work based on what I feel, right? My availability. And so I've been able to respond in a way where I'm constantly checking in. Is this working? Is this not working? I would also say being able to shift when things aren't going as planned and using those as opportunities as opposed to having them be setbacks. And so I think there's so much to be said. I'm for having plans. I'm for having those intentions. But I've worked with a lot of people over the years who are have a perfect plan, but have yet to see whether or not people are interested in their product, or have a perfect plan, but have yet to see whether or not they like the things that they think they would like about their business if they were actually in action and doing it. And
Yeah.
so I just think there's so much opportunity in encouraging people to get started. And I look to do the same. When there's something on my heart that I think is valuable, that speaks to a certain time frame, I look to see how I can adapt to it.
What I'm hearing, I'm like totally listening in between the lines here. And I think there's like various buckets of people where, yeah, they won't even take action until they did their whole coaching certification or their whole business plan and spreadsheets. And even then, okay, so the spreadsheets are done, but you still need to take action. And then there's those who you jump into action and you really learn along the way. And this is my experience as an entrepreneur myself. And that's like, you didn't say those exact words, but that's essentially what I'm hearing you say. It's like a mixture of both. Like, you have a plan. Okay, I'm going to do this, this, and this, but like, just know that might not happen. And like, you're going to need to like navigate that. So what helps you stay present and navigate, like, and the phrase that keeps coming to mind for me is like regulating my emotions. Like, how do you, okay, like shit's hitting the fan, there's a global pandemic, or I'm a father now, or whatever. Like, what are some of your practices that have been working for you?
That's a great question. I appreciate that. And so, what the first thing that comes to mind is I developed a training in 2020, a virtual training that was called Riding the Tides of Change. And I would say I developed it hoping that there were people who were going to need it from a participant standpoint. But I also almost 100% developed it because I was like, how am I going to regulate what's happening, right? For people who aren't familiar with my particular business, up until 2020, every offering that Momentum Education did, which is personal and professional development, had always been in person. And on March 11th of 2020, we canceled all of our in-person programming. I think we said for the next 2 weeks, but obviously that was for almost 2 years. And so the reason I bring up that particular workshop was because I think about the ocean tides, right, and how they change from high tides and low tides. There's currents in the water that are more powerful than any swimmer can individually navigate. And I think about that metaphor for my own life of there are people and civilizations who across the planet have thrived for years, not from their ability to control the ocean tides, but from their ability to be aware of the ocean tides. And so for me, knowing when I'm having a low moment, knowing when I'm having a high moment, right, taking the time to celebrate and embrace it, knowing when I feel like, oh, I could use some help with a life jacket right now, knowing when the water doesn't feel right, I might need to get back out in order to regulate. I'm constantly checking in individually with what the tides of my personal life, my own experience is telling me. And then I'm doing that from a business perspective as well. I might have, hey, this is the day we're going to announce this big thing that I've been planning for 6 months. And then something happens that day or the day before that makes it inappropriate to announce. And I could go with the plan, or I could say, well, what is the tides of the ocean telling me in this moment? And how may I need to adapt based on what other swimmers are experiencing? So I think about the tides of the ocean and how it relates to the tides of my personal and professional life very consistently. And I also think just one more thing I'll add around that is it also then has an impact on whose boat do I call for when I need support? Because I have a tendency, if I think about 15 years ago versus now, 15 years ago, I would do a lot of swimming by myself professionally, try to figure it out in hiding and isolation and then present it. And the more experience I have, the more willingness I have to say, I don't know. And more willingness I have to say, ask for support. And 15 years ago, I thought it would have been the opposite, that the more experience I gained, the less I would need support. And really, it just had made it so clear to me how vital support is for any entrepreneur.
Oh, there's so much yummy juiciness to unpack there. Thank you so much. And I love that metaphor. I'm a water sign, so love anything with water. And it's so, so true. And what I'm hearing from what you're saying is being future oriented and setting a plan has its value. It's not like don't do that. Obviously, like you need to have like, are we going north or are we going south? Are we going east or west? You need to plug an address into the GPS. You don't want to just get in and swim or row or whatever. But I'm really hearing the importance of staying present,
That's great.
right? Like you have a plan, but what's actually happening today? And is the plan still aligned? And there's such an importance of recalibration. And in my head, I was already spinning on like all the things we could unpack there. But I think I want to leave that there because the thing that really pulled me forward was what you said about support and how 15 years ago, maybe more navigating alone. You also mentioned becoming a father fairly recently. Like, do you feel, and take this question wherever, but what the question that came to mind for me was, I feel like men are typically conditioned or socialized to not ask for support. I think in general we are, but I've seen it a lot in men. What do you what do you have to say about that essentially?
Yeah. I agree with everything you said. I think in general, most people can probably relate to feeling conditioned to try to do things on their own and thrive on independence. But it's very much my experience with men. I think about how often I find out about the challenges a male friend of mine is experiencing because their partner shared with me. And I'm like, oh, but I just saw so and so, and that wasn't mentioned, and
Right,
none of
yeah.
those things. And I think that's one of the things that I'm grateful for is I am experiencing that differently in 2024 than I did 15 years ago. I have friends who are starting to share their personal and professional challenges. I have friends who kind of thrive in vulnerability in ways of which, and I'm also lucky enough to have a lot of my high school and college friendships still be very present in my life. And it's really beautiful to hear them share, like, hey, I'm excited, I'm in therapy. And I go, oh, wow, right? Like, one, I'm excited that they are doing something that supports their mental health, but their willingness to share provides another example as well. And so I think for me, I definitely can relate to feeling pressure at times to be a provider or to have the answers or to do any of those things. And I feel less and less pressure on a consistent basis in relationship to that because I want to, one, follow the example of the people I respect. And there's no one who I respect who claims that they did anything by themselves. And so I'm looking to like follow their lead and continue to learn from them.
That's so good. I'm just feeling it in my whole body as you're talking. Kind of how my brain works is I like distill things into like a nugget. And I feel like for not just men, but we were talking about them, but in general, there's so much value in just saying, I don't know, I need help. And
Absolutely.
I know for me, I mean, and I'm a woman and but I was conditioned to be perfectionistic and all of that. And so I also struggled with like Lone Ranger, and it almost felt like death to say I don't know or that I needed help. Oftentimes, once I say that, the tears will come but then there's this release. And I think that's so important. And so to those of you watching, you men, but all genders, I don't know, I need help. Sometimes it's all you need to say. And the people in your life will just rush to kind of help you figure that out. I also want to know your perspective on this too, because in my experience working with men, talking to men, being with men, having brothers and all of that, it's not that they don't want to be vulnerable or they don't want to share. I think the same way that men are conditioned to not share, I think we non-men are also conditioned to not ask men. And I have found that if I just sit and like close my mouth and say like, how are you really? Like, and I don't speak. If I just don't speak, I find that it will all come out and they will tell you when they're done. Do you agree with that? And do you feel that that is also part of what has supported you in opening up in that way?
Yeah, I do think that's a great point, that the same conditioning around not sharing is also part of the conditioning of not checking in or asking, all right. There's that saying, right? Who checks on the strong friend? And I think that's accurate. I think about my daughter, right? And she's almost 3 years old. And when she like doesn't understand something, she's like, help, right? And I think about how we're like, if she's scared, I'm scared. There's a boogeyman, right? And then, but for many of us, there becomes a point in our lives where we've been taught to not mention what we think the boogeyman is, or not mention that we're scared, and not say that I need help. And I think that also happens a lot with entrepreneurs and business owners who, by nature of their role, are primarily only being asked questions that someone else couldn't have figured out or hasn't figured out yet, right? So in my role as the director of my organization, I rarely get brought, hey, I just want you to know, Robinson, everything's going as planned.
Mm.
Brought the things that aren't going as planned. If it was going as planned, they wouldn't be bringing it to me, right? And so I think being able to still be in the leadership position of your organization, particularly if you're an entrepreneur, and then but still being the type of leader who admits when they don't know something, admits when they need help, admits when that was my mistake, or I didn't see it, or I thought this was a good idea, and maybe in hindsight it's not. I think I see a lot of what we're talking about on a personal level, how transferable it is when you're driving an organization or a business.
I want to underscore what you said about like people coming to you with what's not going well. I think that's another part of conditioning, or how like society works up until now. Hopefully we can continue to shift it, but like we focus on what's going wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there needs to be an overemphasis on what's going right. Like what is going as planned? Okay, now what's not going as planned? Like can we mix up the feedback here, because it's a lot of negative. And there was something I wanted to actually tag back to that's related to what we're talking about. You mentioned, and it literally was like this big light bulb just went off, where you used to swim alone, but then you're also, I forget exactly how you said it, but like, whose boat do you call on? Can you say a little bit more about that? I'll say this first too. When I first started as an entrepreneur, I totally was like working on believing in myself, learning business, learning things that I've never done before, because I come from corporate Wall Street, and I just was like, any boat, any boat will do. And I got on some wrong boats, to be honest. So either I was swimming alone or desperate for any boat. So that's kind of where that question comes from. Like, how can you, from what you've learned, for our listeners or watchers, like, yeah, how do we decide what boat? What's that like?
I will definitely share what's working for me in this moment, but I think the experience you just said of like, oh, that might have been the wrong boat, or now, I think that happens more times than not. And I think what can sometimes occur is that people, particularly those who are getting started in business, become very harsh with themselves, as opposed to treating it like, oh, wow, now I know what boat not to get into. Instead of it being like a beat up, it gets to be, wow, that's a great opportunity. Now I know exactly what I don't want. And I'm not hearing you saying that, but I think I have heard people kind of be upset with themselves for the choices they made at the time that they were really thought, well, that was the best choice. They were like excited about that possibility. There's a couple things that jump to mind. One is the professional aspect, right? So it's like, who am I hiring for the right things that they bring, a strength that I don't bring, etc. And I think that's really important. I also think I see a lot of entrepreneurs who spend too much time trying to learn new skills, as opposed to focusing on the skill they bring to their business and then seeing who can bring that other skill. It's like, oh, I got into this because I love making jewelry. Great. So why are you making a website? Like, make the jewelry. That's the one thing you bring to the table that no one else can bring your creative vision to mine. Someone else may be able to support with the website copy. And
Yeah.
so, but I think sometimes that solo experience of having to do it ourselves, we'll have someone say, okay, I have to learn the following skill. I have to do the following thing. I have to do this myself, as opposed to finding the right people who complement and bring the things that you either don't bring, or things that you could do, but maybe isn't the best use of your time. And then from a personal level, it's almost as important to me as a professional level is like, who are the people you can call and vent to, right? And they're going to like just be an ear. Who are the people you can call and vent to, and they're going to listen to a certain point, and then they're going to say, okay, now what are we going to do about it, right? Who are the people you can call when something went really, really well and will actually genuinely celebrate you? You know, I think in my professional career, some of my loneliest moments weren't the hard times because I knew how to get like in a bunker and like, so I'm going to knock this out. It was like, wow, we just succeeded. But I was looking to my left and looking to my right and be like, well, who do I celebrate with? I think in addition to finding the right professional resources, collaborators, people who are excited to work with you and things of that nature, I think it's also really important to curate the people in your personal life that you feel comfortable to share with and that you're excited to share with.
It sounds so simple, but I find that not a lot of us know how to do it. And learning how to do it, I find, is also a process and a journey. It's not just like, yay, now I know. Everything you're saying echoes a lot of what I've experienced personally and professionally. And also, thank you for normalizing that it's all okay and like you don't have to beat yourself up. It's like I feel like there's such a black and whiteness sometimes, especially to business. And because it's not so widely taught, like many entrepreneurs, like even if you go to business school, MBA, whatever, we all learn just by jumping in the water
Absolutely.
at the end of the day. And it is what it is, you know, and normalizing the ebbs and flows, normalizing the low moments, normalizing the high moments, but also finding the right people around you. An environment is everything. And it's okay if right now you're like, oh, any boat, any boat. Okay, great. Get all the boats, get on all the wrong boats. Like I will celebrate you for and then once you find it's like, well, now you know it's not the wrong boat. I think we glorify so much like getting it right the first time, and getting it wrong is also so valuable.
Agreed, wholeheartedly. And there's so much to learn about what you don't want to do a second time, in addition to what you want to do. It's like, oh, I love doing this, but also knowing what you don't want to do to me is really incredibly valuable because otherwise we can find ourselves running businesses that aren't like aren't actually our dream, but we've now shaped into ways that no longer fit within our context and the integrity of why we started in the first place.
And it's okay to pivot, like not even just the businesses, but also the clients that we work with. Like for me, a big shift in my business was before when I was just like, anybody, I need money, whatever, I need this to work. It was like, I worked with a lot of the wrong clients and I'm like, cool, now I know. And saying no has just been really great. And this is not to say that those people are like bad or anything. It's just not a fit. One thing that I wanted to, we talked a lot about like the inner work and being present, which, you know, honestly, I feel like almost every, if not every entrepreneur would say, it really is like 80-20, like 80 personal. Like it's like you gotta self-regulate, you gotta have endurance, you gotta have stamina, you gotta have resilience, surrender, neutral like outlook at things. And like I feel like the business strategy side of it is, first of all, there's skills that are like easy to learn or hire out to people that are way better than you probably, right? And it's just simple. It's all like business is relatively simple, and I feel like we overcomplicate it because of that 80% personal.
Yeah, I agree. I think I've met successful business people who can't read like can't create their own spreadsheet, right? And can't report their own numbers, but they know when their gut is telling them of a great opportunity and they know when their gut is telling them walk away from an opportunity. And I think that personal work that you speak of allows us to remove the things that can get in the way of seeing ourselves and our clients, our businesses, our time clearly.
I do want to pivot a little bit to talking about online, since this show is also about online and social media and content creation, and especially, and you did mention it a little bit earlier with the pandemic prior, fully in person, fully brick and mortar, and then needing to go fully online. I'm sure there's so much you can say, but what comes to mind when I ask, like, what was that like? Like, was it hard? Like, were you barely on social media and then it was like, oh my gosh, we need to use social media more? Like what? Spill the tea.
That's a great that's a great question. And there's so much I think in thinking about what were the experiences, because I remember it as clear as day. I was I was like taking a shower on March 10th, and I'm like, oh, tomorrow we have to close. Like I was like, got it. I like woke up that morning, and I will say this: there is a power of making a decision and then committing to it
Mm,
that if I had spent the next 4 days debating whether or not we should close or not close, would have been a very significantly lost opportunity. By the end of that weekend in New York City, there was a curfew on Sunday, etc. But because I made that decision on Wednesday, I got to spend the next 5 days in action as opposed to debating what was the right thing to do. And I'm grateful for that. So that was one of the kind of eye-opening moments for it. And again, everything was brick and mortar, everything was in person. And then the first time I ever led a Zoom was for a personal development workshop on March 13th of 2020. That
wow.
had been
First
planned to
time on
do
Zoom?
first time on Zoom.
Whoa.
I had called someone who had technical skills. I said, hey, my workshop starts at 10. Can you meet me virtually at 8 and show me how to do this, right? And then over in the last 4 years, we've worked with over 4,500 different people virtually in over 45 different countries. And none of that was on track. None of that was planned. And I think in thinking about the takeaways, I think there is something about, they say, right, like necessity is the need of all, is like the cause of innovation. I'm clear that if I didn't need to pivot in that way, I could have spent a decade talking about, well, how do we utilize online learning, but not really committing to it. And I think about that for people who are treating the business that they want to be their main business as their hobby, and how challenging that can be to, if you're not fully committed to it, to spend that time. And I know I'm not telling people to be irresponsible about their finances or what pays
Right.
their bills, but to really think about, are there ways in which by not kind of fully committing, they're slowing down their own ability to learn and accelerate through that. The other thing that really jumps to mind too is what was really great, right, is that in learning, you get to like learn in real time, right? So I didn't, right? There was like, okay,
There was
I'm
no
gonna
time
try
to
to,
just take a workshop for a few weeks and like plan it all out.
it was like I get to jump into this, and I think there is something to be said about jumping into something and seeing, well, what is the demand, what is the request, right? What am I hearing from feedback in terms of what's taking off, what's not taking off? I may have all these, again, all these plans, but what's great about, I think, social media, what's great about online is that the feedback often occurs in real time. Doesn't mean that there can't be long-term leads and things of that nature, but there is an immediate aspect of like, did this work or did this not work based on what my plan is? And then am I willing to shift or pivot alongside that? The last thing I'll say in relationship is that we as an organization, at that point, we were doing a workshop in New York City, Washington, D.C., other cities, but I think there was only maybe 3 weekends of the entire year where we weren't busy and booked with a workshop somewhere on the planet. And then in March, we went from booked to zero. And particularly for entrepreneurs who are starting off, there is something really exciting. I would say there's an opportunity that, if the bigger you get, sometimes the harder it is to turn and make changes. And when you're at that lean, small aspect, there's an opportunity to say, oh, well, I can pivot this way. I'm going to pivot this way. And it doesn't need, a board of 400 people or shareholders or stockholders, like just to be on it. It can really be based on real time. I didn't want to be like Blockbuster, right? If that makes sense, right? Like I think about Blockbuster versus Netflix all the time as a
Yes,
business owner.
me too. Me too.
Right. Like I remember when I got my first Netflix subscription, I used to then mail it a letter to the Netflix, and they would send me back 3 DVDs, and then I would mail again, and then they would mail back. It was like a mail service for DVDs. And then I look at Netflix now as a streaming content platform. They correctly read the tides of change.
Yeah.
They said, this is our plan and this is where the world is going. And then in my neighborhood, there's like a old Blockbuster, like,
A return box?
yeah, it's a return bot that's like, and every time I see it, I'm like, okay, I don't want to be them, right? What is the world needing next? What is it going to require from me differently than before? So I think about that a lot. I know that I said a lot, but I think there's a lot of opportunities to, as I reflect on that time, to still have it be applicable to this time.
I'm picking up everything you're putting down, and I want to highlight some things for the audience. First thing is, trusting your gut and making a decision fast. And there's such a fine line there, right? Between like erratically moving from like anxiety to like versus like that silent in the shower moment of we're gonna close tomorrow. And it often happens in those silent moments where we can actually be with ourselves. So, hot tip that I'm getting from what you're saying is like spend like take that time. If you're just doing, how can you actually navigate the tides? You're not actually looking at the tides, the personal development that goes into being able to do that. And we get better at that over time. Would you say that's been fine tuned? Like for you to get to that point to even trust that you weren't that good in the very beginning at that, I'm assuming.
There's a question that changed the direction of my life professionally and personally when I was about to make a business decision that I don't think would have led to momentum still being in existence 15 years later. And probably if it was, I probably would not be involved with the organization. I was seeing a grief counselor at the time. My mother had just passed away. The grief counselor asked me, when was the last time your gut was wrong? And I didn't have a lot of evidence of that time when my gut was wrong. I had a lot of evidence of times in which I didn't listen to my gut and I had wished I had. And that was asked to me in 2010. And it's something I think about consistently. But something I heard more recently from my wife, Tamara, who I believe heard it from someone in her life. And it goes back to what you were just saying about when you're doing. Anxiety is loud. Your gut is like at most heard in the quiet moments. And so doing the work that you said, right, to like, okay, sometimes we need to pause. If you don't have time to pause, then you definitely need to pause. Because
like what did they say? If you don't have time to meditate 30 minutes, then you need to meditate for an hour.
Exactly. And so it's in those moments, like you said, where it's like, oh, I could do something sporadically. I could act out of desperation. I could jeopardize credibility in the following field by making a quick, erratic decision. But if I really take the time to pause and quiet those other things, if I'm doing that self work, then am I able to hear what my gut may have been trying to tell me, but wasn't louder than my anxiety, my ego, my fear, any of those things.
Other people are saying, all of that stuff. That's so, so powerful. And I'll just share because I feel it's important to share in this. So, how I do that on a day to day, and because I get it, I have clients, I have friends that are like, but I can't, but I can't, but I can't. And it's like, let me see your screen time. Oh, you can. Like, let me see your screen time. You can. You take a shower, don't you? You go to the bathroom, don't you? And like for me, I actually focus more on how much space can I create in my day versus what do I need to do.
That's great.
A to-be list versus a to-do list. And on busy days, like there are some days where I can't, and I know parents, people running multiple organizations, all that stuff, it can feel like you can't, but like you can. And for me, on the busiest days, I remember one like day that I had that I was so committed to everything that I said. Like I was living in LA at the time. I was in the Valley, then I had to be on the West Side for all my LA people. You know that what that's like. And I had this recording here, and I had to do this writing here, and I had these clients here. And I was like, no, my gut said, you can do it. You can do it. And I found even in those, like, while I'm at a red light, I'm good. I'm okay. I'm good. So you can find them, and they're so important. So thank you for sharing that. I know you have a program called Momentum Premier where you do help entrepreneurs and executive leaders navigate these things. And we've talked already about a lot. Is there any one or two like main things that we haven't talked about that you're like, I want to mention that too? Struggles that you've seen, common struggles that you've seen they face.
That's a great question. So I think another common struggle I see is people who are kind of creating this experience of being like the best kept secret in their lives. It's like a consistent thing I see with people who are like feeling really challenged. And then it's not something I see as consistently with people who would describe themselves as thriving, right? I think there's an openness and willingness to share, whether that's like sharing the pitfalls, sharing the challenges, sharing the high moments. A lot of people feel uncomfortable sharing their wins. That's when they feel most vulnerable for some. And so I think it's very hard. I remember watching like as a kid this like news clip that really stuck out to me where they were interviewing someone, a neighborhood where someone had passed away, and they said, well, did you know that the person next door did all these things? And none of the neighbors knew. And it just made me think about how hard it is to receive support when people don't know what you're up to. Yeah, so that's something that I definitely think occurs as a common struggle for many people, particularly starting off in their journey when they maybe don't want to share yet if it feels aspirational or They don't
Or like
feel
they feel like they haven't done anything yet, but they
exactly.
have. I mean, they're here, yeah, yeah.
So I think that is something that I consistently see as well. And then what's on my heart, and maybe it's just what happens on the planet on this particular day that we're doing this, I've yet to see anyone I super duper respect be able to go through life without being criticized.
Ooh,
um, and it's like it's uh it's just something that I think is really powerful to name, right? I was talking to a good friend of mine. His name is Travis. He's a poet and lawyer, right? And
and rock
so he's
star.
just like a multifaceted person. And he said, the majority of art that will ever be created will never be shared.
Mm,
And I think about everyone who has like a poem they wrote but didn't tell anyone, or a song that's on their hard drive, or a script. And so I think for so many people, they could have 99 people clapping for them, but they get that one review or one person or someone gives a snide comment and they feel so deflated that it removes the energy that was fueling all of this other success.
yeah.
When I go leave this room, I'm gonna go a room where I have a Beyonce record on the wall. And it's like, we have people who have never sang a note criticizing Beyonce every single day. And
Yep.
there is something about people who are willing to get in that arena, right? I think about what
Hey,
I've experienced in youth in these last 15 years of someone who's like willing to say these waves are coming, but I'm going to get in and I'm going to keep giving in. I'm going to swim and I'm going to learn. I think there's something really special about what you get to learn from yourself in that standpoint when you are open to feedback, but not being deterred by the people who maybe aren't on the boat with you.
Normalizing being criticized. I think, yeah, a lot of people get stuck because they're of fear of what other people are going to say or think. And something that I say a lot to my clients and that I've had to learn for myself is like they're not gonna like you anyway. So might as well just be yourself. Like, but I love how you said it. Like, there's not a single person who you respect, who you admire that has not been criticized.
No.
And the other piece about vulnerability, which actually, those of you watching, definitely check out Joy Buffalini's episode. We went a lot more deeper into, she called it what you said about sharing. There's like a vulnerability shadow. And sometimes we don't even realize we're doing it. We were taught, oh, don't brag, like don't be braggadocious or whatever. But what I've learned, and I've actually learned this from you and through my journey with momentum education, it's like brag, share, because I've learned it one from witnessing it. It actually is such a gift.
Yeah.
Other people, when you share all of who you are, when you share your gifts, when you say, yeah, I released 100 pounds, or I made $1 million, or I did that, and it doesn't have to be huge, big, small, all of it, just share, share, share. And those are, it's so funny. They're so simple, but I think, yeah, those are really, 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 really good.
Yeah. And it relates so much, like you said, to sometimes in order to read that spreadsheet, I need to have been in a space to really see what's happening, right? Or I need to, if I'm going to listen to what my gut is telling me, I can't be thinking about what happened 2 weeks ago when someone hurt my feelings, right? And like, and it's easier said than done, but it's those things that I've really looked at practice that I think helps being able to respond in business.
And I think what I would want to leave the audience with, like just thinking about this whole amazing conversation, is surround yourself with the right people. Honestly, environment is everything. I'm not saying like cut people off or do whatever you want. It's your life. But like for me, like I haven't like cut my family off, for example, or certain people in my life, but they serve a certain purpose. And I don't talk business with certain people. And when people ask me, well-meaning, loving family members are like, so I don't really get this. And I will literally say, I am not going to speak about this with you because I already know, like, and so I have chosen to surround myself around people like you, other guests on this show. And so if you're starting out or growing or scaling, I'm not saying cut off everyone else who's not an entrepreneur, but definitely have your squad for
Absolutely.
sure, because no one who's actually in the arena, as you said, and as I remember Brene Brown uses Teddy Roosevelt's quote, literally no one in the arena is going to ever make fun of your reel where you look weird, because they've done it too. Like, I literally don't know anyone that's actually doing the work that I'm doing that would ever make me feel bad or stupid or dumb for what I'm doing. Really, and like you said with the Beyonce record, it's oftentimes the people that aren't doing it at all or anonymous on with no profile pic on Instagram. And so take those criticisms as a badge of honor. I remember I had my first like hate mail when I was really building my email list, and it was so condescending and it was so rude. And I was like, I'm making an impact, And someone once said, I forget who, or if it's someone famous, tell me in the comments, but unless you draw a line in the sand, like you're always gonna be like liked. Like
Mhm.
unless you're willing to not be liked and draw a line in the sand or something. I totally butchered it, but something like that, right? And a lot of people get triggered by this sometimes when I say it, but I've done my self work to know, like, I know where I'm coming from when I say that. I'm like, I'm gonna be myself. I already know people aren't gonna like me, but you know what? The people who do come to me, who are magnetized, who do like me, like those are the boats I want to get on.
Really. That's something I know you know that about yourself, but I do want to say that's something that I have experienced from you and respect about you, is that your willingness to be who you are, because there's people who are looking for you and they're able to find you because of your willingness to be seen.
Thank you so much. Get me emotional. I really, really appreciate that. And I've done a lot of work personally to get here, a lot of healing. I know you mentioned therapy. So also like do the work. It's not just about the strategy and the social media algorithm. Honestly, all of that is secondary in what I found in the last 10 plus years of doing what I'm doing. It's really aligning with my gut. Thank you for sharing so many gifts with us, but I do know you have another gift code, something you'd like to share with us for our listeners to take advantage of. Could you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure, I appreciate the opportunity to share about it. I think there might be people who are listening. This is their first time interacting with me and maybe hearing about our organization, Momentum Education, and we do personal and professional development. I would say we work with many different organizations. We've had over 45,000 different graduates in the last 21 years. And I would say if I was shining the light the way I see you of like who would be great, it's like if you are someone who loves learning about yourself, if you are someone who has dreams that you are looking to take to the next level, if you're someone who maybe realizes there's ways in which you've been slowed down trying to do things by yourself and you're looking for a team of support, then Momentum Education is a great catalyst for that. And our introductory personal development workshop is called the Momentum Workshop, right? Which is all about you getting momentum for the things that matter to you. And so, as a thank you to your curated list and the people who are listening, we're going to offer a rate for the Momentum Workshop that is typically offered at $498. But if you go to momentumeducation.com/start and put in the code COSMIC24, it would remove $400 from that rate and have a full weekend workshop at a lowered rate. And really, I think the biggest investment is it's an investment in saying your dreams matter and taking a step that helps them come to fruition.
Thank you so much. That is so generous. I actually, honestly, to those of you watching before we recorded, I did not know like what the gift was, but that is so amazing. Totally take advantage of it. And I want to just speak for myself from my experience, who I am today, 2024, and the life that I've been able to create for myself. Everyone that I tell, like the start of that was Momentum Education. I took it when I was 24 years old, and it completely just helped me shift my perspective on life and on choice, like the choices that I get to make, how I sit with or not sit with trust, how I interact with people. And it's very fun and experiential. And at that rate, I mean, it's like a weekend deep dive into yourself. See yourself as like this beautiful creature that you want to know more about. That person made that choice. Why did they do that? You got on the wrong boat, even though your gut said not to. Why did you do that? I would say the Momentum Education Workshop is a great place to do that. It's a great place for anyone who has never done any sort of personal development before, but also for anyone who has done lots of personal development. I don't know if I've told you this personally. Momentum Education Workshop was the start of my journey, the first layer that got peeled back, that opened my eyes to the avatar world of what could be possible. If there's anything about me that you're like, wow, how does she do that? I had a lot of blinders on before momentum education. As you know, I've been around for a long time, Robinson. You can't get rid of me. I keep So please take advantage of that. That is going to be linked in all the places, in the description, in the emails you get, on my social media. And when you do sign up, let me know, because I would love to congratulate you when you graduate.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you so much. I've had so much fun.
We switch this, switch this, switch